Hello everyone, it's Annie, and today I will be ranking all of Jane Austen's novels. So if you've been following my channel this year, you know that I have been doing a year-long read-along called Down Memory Jane of all Jane Austen's works. I had previously read Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion before this year, but this year I read all of her remaining works, and I just finished Emma, so now I'm ready to rank them all and give you my thoughts. So let's go. So I'm going to go from my least enjoyed novel to my best. And so I just want to preface this with saying that I did love all 6 of her novels. It was such a great experience to read all of them in one year, and it was just, I don't know, it was so comforting, especially once the weather started to get cooler, and it was just so cozy to read these well-beloved classics. So the first one I unfortunately have to put in the last spot for me is Northanger Abbey. I know now, I didn't at the time that I read this, but I know now that this was the first work that Jane Austen wrote. Not her first published work, but her first work that she wrote. And it just was very, very slow. It follows the main character who goes to Bath on a family trip, and she meets this guy who brings her back to Northanger Abbey, and then she kind of gets carried away thinking like, oh my god, his dad is like a murderer, and like there are spirits in the house, and like it's supposed to be a parody of Gothic novels. And before I read this, I had talked to my sister about it, and she said outright that if I am not familiar with the Gothic novels of the time period that Jane Austen was writing in, then I would have a hard time enjoying this book, and I think she was right. Because I'm not familiar with any of the Gothic novels of that time period, and it just wasn't enjoyable for me. One of the biggest problems with it for me was that it was extremely, extremely slow, like I said. I listened to the audiobook, and until 50% in, like nothing was happening. 50% in, she finally goes to Northanger Abbey, and it's like, we could have moved this along a little bit faster and have things be more interesting. And I just didn't really connect with the main character at all. Like, that's usually the greatest thing about Jane Austen's works, that you can really connect with the main characters, and they're either witty or interesting in some way that makes you want to follow their story and root for them. But this main character, I think her name was Catherine, she just was not interesting to me. She was really, really naive, and she was only 17, so she's one of the younger ones, and yeah, unfortunately this was my least favorite Austen that I read this year. So my next pick, my second to least favorite one, might come as a surprise to some people because it is very, very well loved and very popular. It is Sense and Sensibility. Now I will preface this by saying that I have not seen any movie adaptations for these except for Pride and Prejudice, so that isn't influencing me at all. I know that the Sense and Sensibility adaptation with Alan Rickman is very popular, but I have not seen that, so that doesn't influence my opinion at all. I just felt incredibly bored while reading this book, and I, again, didn't really connect with the heroines at all. It follows 2 sisters, one who's very emotional, she's the sensibility character, and the other one is kind of like sensible and kind of more prudent, and they both fall in love with these guys who both end up being really bad guys and like kind of treating them badly, and they find love in the end, obviously, but it's just, I don't know, the story wasn't my favorite. There just wasn't a lot that was interesting to me about it, but I totally understand why people love it. It was very well written, of course, and it was Jane Austen's first published work, so that kind of got her foot in the door. And yeah, I did enjoy it, like I said. I think I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads, but it just, compared to the other Austen works that I have read, I think I was expecting a little bit more, and it just fell a little bit flat for me personally. Okay, so now we're getting into all the ones that I really enjoyed, and next is Emma. I know this is kind of a love it or hate it type of story, and I remember talking to my sister, this is her least favorite Austen work because she hates the main character. I know a lot of people really don't like Emma because she's very arrogant and like very spoiled and just she loves meddling in people's business and gossiping, but I really enjoyed her character. I don't know what that says about me. Like, if we met in real life, I would not like her, probably, but I just really enjoyed reading about her. It was really, really fun to, like, see her mistakes, and I thought she was just such an interesting character. It was a really interesting choice for Jane Austen to make this character who loves meddling in people's business and matchmaking especially, but she doesn't want to get married herself originally, and she like vows to stay away from marriage entirely. And I just think that is so interesting, especially given Jane Austen's life circumstance. She never got married either, and I really enjoyed this book. I think it was a little bit long. I mean, all of Jane Austen's works can get long and long-winded a little bit. That's just because of the time period it was written in. But I think there were a lot of characters, and I really enjoyed the first bit of it, like maybe the first quarter of it. And then there was a time in there where it kind of got slow and a bit confusing because there were so many new characters being introduced. It was a little bit hard for me to keep track of all the names and everything that was going on and the relationships between everybody. But all in all, I really enjoyed this. This was the last Jane Austen work that I finished. So as of now, I have finished all of them, and it's such a triumphant feeling. And it's late November when I'm filming this. I just finished Emma, and it was so cozy to read during like gloomy fall days. It was really enjoyable, and I loved it so much. And I really enjoyed Emma's character. I think she was just a fun heroine. Like, I feel like in Sense and Sensibility, the characters felt very bland to me. So at least Emma isn't bland, you know. She might be not such a great person, at least in the beginning of the book, but through the story, her character really develops, and you can really see that, and I just loved seeing that so much. And all in all, it was a really enjoyable read for me. Okay, now we're on to the last three, and I have to say, I was really conflicted with all of these because I loved these last three so much, and they're just so special to me, and it was so hard to figure out the rankings for this. But I think all in all, the third favorite will have to be Mansfield Park. I think this is, before making this video, I had looked up some other ranking lists of Jane Austen's novels, and I was so sad to see that this book was almost always at the bottom of the list, and it was so sad. I absolutely loved this book. I think it deals with a lot of different issues that Jane Austen's other novels don't focus on, and it wasn't just like a comedic romance type thing with some drama added in. It dealt with some really serious issues, and the main character, Fanny Price, is so different from all of Austen's other heroines, and she is just a really unique person to read about. She's in a terrible situation. Her family kind of just gives her to her cousin's family to live with because they don't have enough money to take care of her. And this is as a child, so she has this traumatic experience being basically given away from the only family she's ever known. And she gets to this cousin's place, her aunt and uncle's, Mansfield Park, and she has to deal with, being treated unfairly. And her personality, I think a lot of people say she's very, she's too weak, she's too soft-spoken, or she's too good, like she's too good-hearted, and she's not as complicated and well-rounded as the other characters. But I think she is one of the best, most realistic characters that Austen has ever written. I think she shows incredible strength in the midst of all of these difficult situations she's forced into, And I know that the romance is a little bit controversial in this day and age. No spoilers in this, but if you've read all of Austen's works, you know what I'm talking about. But it was the time period, and I think it worked phenomenally well for the story. And I was just so happy to see Fanny get happiness at the end of this. She really deserved it. And the only reason why, I love this book so much. The only reason why this wasn't higher in the ranking is because in the middle of the story, there's this weird section that just felt so out of place where they were putting on a play. And like there was this weird controversy. They were staying in someone else's house at the time, and there was this weird fight that happens where like some people thought it was like improper to put on this play because it's like too frivolous. And some people were like, well, who cares? And I just think that was kind of, it made more sense for the time period. And right now, it like doesn't make any sense at all. So it was just hard to connect with that section of the story. But I absolutely adored everything else about this. So now we have two left. I'm going to go and say that Pride and Prejudice is my second favorite Austen. And I love it. Obviously, who doesn't? It's one of my favorite classics of all time, and it's just gorgeous in every way possible. I've watched both adaptations, the miniseries and the 2005 movie, and I love them both as well. I first read this in 10th grade English class, so we were forced to read it, but I loved it, and I was one of the only people who liked it. And it was surprising to me too, because I didn't think I would like this sort of classic romance story, but I just loved it so much. If you don't know what it's about, it's about the story of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. And who doesn't love Mr. Darcy? Come on, he's the perfect guy. And Bingley is there, Mr. Bingley and Jane, and I just love this cast of characters so much that Austen created. The Bennet family is filled with such vibrant personalities, and there's so many spin-offs, well-deserved. I just love this story so much, and I would watch the adaptation of it literally every day of my life and not get tired of it. So yeah, it definitely is so close to being number one. I had a really hard time deciding which was going to be number one or not. But, of course, the last one left is Persuasion. I was just so surprised when I read this. I read this many years ago, actually. It was right after my mom got me this beautiful cloth-bound collection of all of Jane Austen's works. And first of all, let's just admire this. Like, hello. It does have Lady Susan in it too. And I have read that, but it's not a complete novel, so I'm not gonna include it in this video. But if you've also read Lady Susan, put your opinions down below, because I'm really interested to hear what other people have to say about it. So, Persuasion. I think this story is really beautiful and just really heart-wrenching in a way that Pride and Prejudice is not I don't know. Pride and Prejudice is emotional and exciting and wow, like, I don't know, it has a passion in it. And Persuasion is just like so real. I don't know how to describe it, but it follows Anne. Maybe that's why I like it so much, because we share a name. But it follows Anne, who is in her late 20s. She's unmarried, and she doesn't really have any prospects anymore. And this is because she had refused an offer of marriage from a person who she really, really loved, but for some reason she didn't accept his offer of marriage, and now he is in the Navy, and he comes back into her life, but he's no longer interested in her now that she is old and kind of an old maid at this point. And the love story between Anne and Captain Wentworth was just amazing. I really think that the letter Wentworth sends Anne is one of the most beautiful love letters ever written in fiction or anywhere else. It is just so beautiful and so perfect and passionate, and I think that this is a masterpiece. And I know that Pride and Prejudice is extremely popular for good reason, but this really should not be overlooked. And I know that this is also popular, but a lot of people haven't even heard of it. So please do yourself a favor and read Persuasion, because you won't regret it. It is amazing. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this video ranking of Jane Austen's novels. Please put your favorite Jane Austen novel down below in the comments. I would love to hear your opinions as well. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel for more bookish videos. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye.